Well, let's move on to the subject of fires. And I would like to say a big thank you to one of our viewers, Jean, who, in a matter of hours, organised an interview so that I could speak to a lady who had been right at the heart of a major fire over on the western side of Canada, a location called Shuswap. And I was able to speak to her a couple of nights ago. I've just taken a little clip from our discussion. We will have the full interview up as soon as we can, but let's have a little look at what she had to say to me. When did the fires first become an issue? And take us into what happened and what you've learned.
We were aware of a fire in the Adams Lake region the week before. We've heard about it being contained, uncontained, winds, lack of rain. Rain was supposed to be here. And we have since learned that the fire was let to go out of control and not managed. And it went for, I think it's at 14,000 acres of damage so far. So when we learned about it, it was far enough away. We weren't alerted in any way possible. We were watching it on Facebook, of all places, to get your information, because there isn't any information close. Then we were brought into an app called Alertable, which is supposed to notify us. And it's created through the CSRD, which is a local governing body that manages the area that I live in. And the people that were helping us get out of the area told us that they were told that the firefighters were to stand down from the fire. And I thought that's pretty scary, because this fire now is affecting us. We didn't know till Saturday morning from a neighbor who had a NASA connection to the satellite to see that our property was okay. We didn't know our livestock was even alive. We were at another property, and we decided we better hurry back, because we're getting reports of the police not allowing the residents back into their zone to take care of their animals. So we hurried up and left Monday morning with as much supplies as we could afford to get back here.
So that's just a little clip. Brenda went on to talk about all sorts of subjects, but the theme of it was violent, terrible fires burning. One of the figures that I saw was talking about an area 434 square kilometres. Now, whether that was the total areas of fires in Canada, I don't know, but that's a huge area. What she described was confusion at best in the firefighting, backburns being lit that ultimately, because of the wind direction, then became another fire threatening the local community. But when people challenged what was going on, the police in particular, very dictatorial, telling them what they could and could not do. 1 minute they had to get out, but other people were going into the areas. And when the local people, many of them who have livestock, tried to say, we've got to get back in to save those animals, they were blocked and really just told that there'd been a diktat from on high, and they weren't allowed to go back into the area. So in the full clip, you'll hear us talking about a number of issues, but most of it is to do with what appears to be incompetence in the firefighting, and people put at risk due to very strange decisions that were made. But then as local people and local amateur firefighters tried to do things to protect their local areas, they were basically blocked and by the police, who were extremely forceful to the point of being quite aggressive with some of the local people. Now, eventually this did settle down a bit, but what happened was fractious enough to make Canadian press. And I'm going to thank Jean again for sending me over this particular article, How Wildfire in British Columbia's Shuswap is Fanning Political Flames. Sorry, pressing the wrong button here. Let's get this in. But this is the meat of it. Residents were defying orders and trying to defend their homes. But look at how it comes across in the article. It says the Bush Creek East fire has destroyed or significantly damaged nearly 170 properties, and authorities have called it a major front in the province's worst fire season on record. Said it swept through Shuswap like a tornado, but there's also been a focus because of some residents' decisions to defy evacuation orders and instead stay to defend their homes from the flames. So political debate coming up, and if we carry on through the article, just to give you a flavour of this, you can obviously freeze the screen, have a look at yourselves. But it ended up that were people who were entitled to still be in their property, or they'd gone back to their property, but of course they had nothing and they could not get anything. So it says here, these individuals should receive the supplies they need to continue to protect properties and structures in their communities. This government must order an end to this blockade of vital resources immediately. Now, this is quite an encouraging comment because it's showing that local politicians, local councillors, effectively, if we talk in UK language, were starting to criticise the authorities for a draconian blanket on people in this area. Many of those people were utterly traumatised by the fire and the effect of the fire. But they are now still in a position where they're desperately short of supplies and they can't access supplies because of controls which the central Canadian government is imposing on them. So the overall theme of Brenda's conversation to me was that locals did not feel that the Canadian government was working with them to support them through the terrible experience of these major fires. The Canadian government was actually enforcing some sort of suppressment, crowd control order, and it didn't really care if that meant people were trapped in their homes with no food or water in some cases, or feed for the animals. So I'm watching your face as I'm taking us through this report, Vanessa, because of course you've been looking at fires in other areas of the world. And I will just add, before I pass over to you, that Brenda also, in a very quiet way, said it's really strange how all of a sudden we've got these major fires occurring because we've never seen anything like it before. And the article I've just mentioned also indicates that these fires, the intensity of them have never been seen. So what can you tell us about fires in other locations?
Well, I'm going to come back to Greece to quickly look at what was happening in Alexandroupolis, which we talked about last week. But first of all, I found this sort of interesting interview. I recommend going and watching all of it, between Vigilant News and Dr. David Martin, who was one of the very kind of vociferous voices, basically exposing the COVID project. But I just want to play this. It's about 3 minutes, but it's well worth listening to as to why he thinks all these fires are going on. So just roll the video.
If you look at the bizarre nature right now of the people who are administering the campaign of terror on CO2 emissions, and you're watching them let forest fires be started and burned with impunity, you sit back and go, well, hold on a minute. I thought carbon dioxide was bad. So why are we increasing the carbon dioxide by taking trees out of circulation? Well, the answer is land reappropriation. That's what it's about. It's about reappropriating land. And the best way to reappropriate land is to have a fire. That has been the case since the Old Testament. So this is not a new thing. This has been around for thousands and thousands of years. When humans cannot win on a fair playing field, they use fire. And they use fire to destroy an old appropriation of land and reappropriate it to a new use. There's no question that what is going on in Canada right now is a massive, massive, massive land grab where the state will come in its largesse and propose new development of what? Of things that will be pro-state. That's not a human recovery. And by the way, as much as Maui may or may not be the sum of a series of electrical failures, there is no question that the power systems in Maui were not managed to diminish the risk of fire. We will not say, and I will not say they necessarily intentionally set them. I'm not going to get into that conversation. What I will say is that very simple safety protocols, like if lines are down, don't send energy back into a down line, Those kinds of things were not done. So were some of those fires, without question, at least negligently set? The answer is without question. The evidence is unambiguous. And by the way, even NPR talks about that evidence. So the fact is, we know that what we have is a situation where this ongoing campaign of terror is about reallocating, redistributing, and reappropriating resources into state control. And there's no question that that's what happened in Maui. There's no question that's what's happening in Canada. And there's no question that that's what's happening in fires that are going on all around the world, remarkably in places where climate change activists say they're the most concerned with climate change. They're pumping CO2 into the air. So this hypocrisy is necessary to create the cognitive dissonance.
I just think that's a fascinating statement, and it ties into what I'm discovering now in Greece. For example, the actual maintenance of the land that has just been burned, particularly in northern Greece, in the E-Evros region, which we mentioned, Alexandroupolis is the capital of that region. For example, the Parnitha Forest Service, not a single foreman, and only 7 forest rangers for 350,000 acres of forest. Extraordinary neglect of some of the most environmentally valuable territory in the world today in Greece. But if we move on, also following the fires, particularly in Alexandroupolis that we talked about last week, and we also highlighted the advantage to NATO of being able to potentially appropriate the land that has been burned. On top of that, they received MORE, which is an energy company or conglomerate, received the green light for a new 53.6 megawatts wind farm in Rhodope and Evros, the region that we're talking about. Let's see what it says. So they received the green light, in particular, according to AEPO, which was issued on July the 28th by General Directorate of Environmental Policy of the Minister of Interior, etc., etc. So they named the locations Mati Koshkina, Pondukia, Kofovuni, and Skopje Rachaki, supporting projects in the municipal units of Sapa, Ariani, and Alexandroupolis, in the municipalities of Marinia, Sapa, Ariani, and Alexandroupolis, respectively, of the regional union of Rhodope and Evros. So just moving on, there's a map of all the proposed sites of wind farms in Greek mainland and on the island. So clearly, as we've said before, Greece is being earmarked as the wind farm center for Europe. And I just wanted to show as a final image for people before we play the video. This is the forest of Dadia. 73,000 hectares burned in Evros around Alexandroupolis. 7,290 hectares of forest destroyed. I mean, this is just heartbreaking. This area environmentally was so valuable. It had multiple species of birds of prey and other animals, mammals, insects, etc. It's the only area in Europe where they have all 4 species of European vulture. So their territory, literally in the last 2 weeks, has been completely destroyed. And the fires are still burning. They haven't yet been extinguished.
I just wanted to add a little bit there, Vanessa, when Dr. David Martin was speaking there, and I thought that was really excellent little video clip that you've brought into the news today. But Brenda in Canada was talking about this business of the use of the land and what may happen. One of the things she pointed out to me was that in the beautiful wilderness around her, forested wilderness, much of the land is owned by the Crown. And she said that what they'd noticed over recent years was the brutal methods being used to log, whereby once the trees had taken out, the soil and the ground was so destroyed that it was very difficult for trees to regrow. And so in her mind, in thinking through the fires and what was happening, it seems to me, she was also thinking about what was the plan for that land.
Mm. In Greece, they're actually trying to bring back in a part of the constitution that has been largely kind of shelved, which says that areas that are burned by fire are only to be reforested, that no other development can be done on that land. And in Greece, there is quite a big movement against this wind farm development, more than I've seen in other countries that have been affected by the fires so far.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, we're just going to